Hello, welcome to the Atheist Experience. I'm your host, Russell Glasser, and with me today is Don Baker.
Hey, good to be here.
Welcome back, Don.
Thanks.
Today is Sunday, August 14th, 2016. We're a live call-in, internet-based atheist TV show broadcasting from Austin, Texas, promoting positive atheism and the separation of church and state. You can catch us live every Sunday on YouTube or ustream.tv. The official Atheist Experience website is www.atheist-experience.org. You can also provide feedback by commenting on the official show blog at freethoughtblogs.com/AXP. You can email us at tv@atheist-community.org or join the Atheist Experience official discussion group on Facebook. If you enjoy the show, please check out our related podcast, The Nonprofits, currently airing on the first and third Wednesdays of the month. You can find links at the Atheist Experience website, and the next Nonprofits will be recorded live in this studio on August 17th, beginning at 7:30 p.m. And just like this show, people are welcome to come sit in and watch us banter. The cast and crew of the Atheist Experience will be going to dinner after the show for the second week in a row at Star of India. The address is 2900 West Anderson Lane, and we may or may not be deciding tonight that we would like to make that our permanent place for a while. So if you come, you not only get to eat some tasty food, but you get to vote, or informally. So come on by. I got a couple of announcements before I kick it over to Don, who, of course, is going to have a lot to say, as always. On August 27th, the Atheist Community of Austin is once again going to be hosting a booth at the Austin Pride Festival. So come seek us out and say hi. Lots of people are going to be manning the booth or womaning the booth throughout the day. The Bat Cruise is coming up September 24th from 6 to 8 p.m. Greta Christina, our speaker, is going to be doing her talk, I believe, around 2. Check out the website for details. Greta Christina is an activist, blogger, and author of books such as Coming Out Atheist and Why Are You Atheists So Angry? I have one final update before I let Don go to it. Last week on the show, I discussed the moon experiment that had been talked about on the show 2 weeks before that, with a creationist claiming that the moon actually gives off cold light. There was some science discussion about why some people might be experiencing those results, but I also said that to the best of my knowledge, nobody had submitted themselves doing that experiment. I was wrong. There were a couple of people, looks like a couple of people, Anthony and Keith, both submitted YouTube videos, and I have rectified the situation by putting their videos up at the Atheist Experience blog at freethoughtblogs.com. So go check that out. And finally, I don't do this normally because I don't want to waste too much time on the show, but we have a few viewers from Sweden sitting in on the show today.
3 brothers.
3 brothers. And there's a 4th guy that they apparently left back in Sweden.
A 4th brother they left at home.
Yes. So, hey, Danielle Carlin Forsch. And I butchered that, and that's okay.
Shout out to you. Yeah.
So, Amandus Martin and Lova send their regards. Hey, guys.
Okay.
Okay, don't ask me to do that every week. How are you doing?
Good, good. So I just got back from a vacation in southern Colorado. Anyway, so thinking about what to do.
Me or you?
Oh, my mic fell. Oh, no.
Oh, that's you.
Thinking about what to do for a show topic, and try to do this real quick. Along comes in the newspaper an article about the Pope, and I wanted to talk about news about the Pope in general and talk about what kind of things are published there and what kind of Chomsky filters are at play. So this was an article in the Austin American Statesman. You can get. Okay.
Oh.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Maybe that's better. Anyway, so there's a halfway substantial article on page 2 of the Austin American Statesman, Saturday, July 30th. The title of the article is In Auschwitz Visit, Pope Decries So Much Cruelty. And one of the privileges that Christianity gets in our society is sort of an uncritical promotion by the media. AP and UPI and these other aggregators are pumping out articles, and they have embedded folks that talk about Christian news or whatever, and whether it's properly newsworthy, I don't know. And local papers tend to publish these articles without any edits because they have Catholics or whatever in their audience, and it's kind of a sop to them. And but if you monitor Pope news like some of the atheists do, you come to figure out that most of it is pretty much anything that he does gets publicity. If he scratches his rear end, it gets publicity. If he tells a joke or whatever, if he goes on a trip or has a visit or whatever. And one of the things I like to do is most of the Pope-generated news is self-serving. So I like to look for that message when I'm seeing one of these articles, and I want to hit on that today. And it's interesting to see how each article meets that criteria. So some facts about the article. The article is 9 column inches plus a picture. The Pope visited Auschwitz and Birkenau in July 29th and met with some Holocaust survivors. The focus is on the Pope's plain robes, silent grieving, and the Pope's silence in the article, giving it great. Later, he was quoted as saying, "How much pain, how much cruelty? Is it possible that we humans created in God's image are capable of doing these things?" So those are some facts about the article, and for those in the audience, I have it. You can check it out at dinner or whatever.
Can I just
go ahead.
interject with an immediate impression? I mean, first of all, I don't want to fault the Pope for being sympathetic and sad for people.
Sure.
I think there's a subtle weirdness in focusing on, hey, forgive the people who did this. It's a weird. I'm not stepping on something you're about.
No.
to say.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I mean, it's a little weird that Christianity expects your primary concern to be forgiving people who have done bad things instead of focusing on the people who were specifically wronged. Because when we're talking about standards of good and bad in Christianity, we're often talking about sin, and the only wronged party is
God himself, right?
But let's not lose sight of the fact that there are particular victims. I mean, there were victims of the Holocaust who were the real wronged people in this situation, and maybe those victims or the survivors, they may or may not be able to find it in their hearts to forgive the people who tormented them. But it's not somebody else's place to say that they should forgive those people. I mean, that kind of minimizes their suffering in a way.
Absolutely, and here we have an article where the Pope is sort of, whether orchestrated or not, is sort of interjecting himself in front of these people who were wronged, and making a show of his humility and his silence and his praying in front of this place that held this horrific event, and the Pope is seen as deeply moved by the visit, and what sort of monster wouldn't be deeply moved? I was deeply moved when I went to the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., but nobody wrote a second-page article about me visiting the museum because it's not news, right? This sort of thing belongs in a church bulletin, not a newspaper. And is it really humility and silence when you have a bunch of fawning reporters making a big fuss about it? Right, and we know that the chief Vatican spokesman is a former Fox News correspondent, and I don't think there's any coincidence here that he's, painting a picture here for us. So one of the themes of this thing is blame and the lack of blame, right? The Pope chooses his words very carefully. It's as if the Holocaust is some sort of natural disaster that occurred without any blame. And he urges forgiveness, but forgiveness of whom? And the truth is that Christianity and Catholicism in particular have more than a little blame here. What I would like to see in an article like this is some real facts, like Christianity has the highest kill rate of any religion, and that Jews have been the primary target of Christian persecution for over 1,500 years. The Holocaust kind of changed that, and that people, the mantra has become, we're pro-life, human life is sacred, and these sorts of things. But that's a modern invention.
I don't know how much of that blame is going to wind up in the lap of the Pope. I mean,
well, not this particular Pope,
there.
sure, right? He wasn't there, and
I mean, what I do often want to stress about religious people is that there's not a monolithic thing called Catholicism or Christianity. There are a whole bunch of people picking and choosing a bunch of parts of a nonsense book.
And they're moral to the extent that they ignore that book and choose secular morality, right?
Somewhat. Right.
Anyway, in this book, the Jews are blamed for killing Jesus, right? Let his blood be upon us and our children.
That's terrible.
It's terrible. Matthew 27:25, and I think functionally the Bible's a free pass to kill Jews. You get to go kill them, and if you go have, ask for forgiveness or whatever. And when I've talked about this with Christians and I bring up, there's this eye for an eye thing and life for a life thing, boy, it's amazing how quick people become Gandhi supporters, and they're like, that makes everybody blind, an eye for an eye. So, or they go for forgiveness, or we want to spin doctrine and say that's whatever. So,
I mean, there are good and bad things all over that book. Unfortunately, a lot of people choose to home in on the bad things and live their lives by it, which is disastrous to homosexuals and Jews and and a lot of other groups.
Sure. And there's this claim in Christianity that, when a bunch of Christians are acting on something, that's the Holy Spirit, right? And Nazi Germany was mostly Catholics and mostly Lutherans, and you would think that if God existed and he were acting through these believing Christians, that this wouldn't have gone on quite as long as it did. Hitler gets a lot of blame, and he deserves a lot of blame, but in reality, it was a complacent and complicit laity there in this country that went along with it and didn't stand up for it. So Hitler was a Catholic and viewed that killing Jews was a religious duty, and I have a few quotes here. I am now, as before, a Catholic and always will remain so. He also said, I believe that I'm acting in accordance with the will of the Almighty Creator by defending myself against the Jew. I am fighting for the work of the Lord.
Right. And don't forget that he was following in the footsteps of Martin Luther, who spun off Protestantism and wrote a book called On the Jews and Their Lies.
Yes, he was a very, very famous anti-Semite. That was sort of part and parcel of his religious doctrine. Mm-hmm. Also from Hitler, the National Socialist State professes its allegiance to positive Christianity. And here's the money quote, I think. As for the Jews, I am carrying on with this same policy with which the Catholic Church has adopted for 1,500 years when it has regarded the Jews as dangerous and pushed them into ghettos, etc., because it knew what the Jews were like. I don't put race above religion, but I do see danger in the representatives of this race for the church and state, and perhaps I am doing Christianity a great service. Yeah, pretty creepy stuff. Anyway, so if that doesn't, if your leader is saying stuff like that, you should choose a different leader. The papacy, I think, gets some blame here. Pope Pius the 11th was Hitler's pope. And he was much more concerned with Nazi meddling in Catholic affairs than doing anything of substance to rescue the Jews. And And I think he knew deep in his heart that even with his invisible, all-powerful God on his side, he'd lose against the Nazis. That the Nazis were far more powerful than his God. Pope Benedict the 16th, Ratzinger, who is the last pope and still knocking around the Vatican somewhere, he joined the Hitler Youth in 1941, as that was the easy path, as everybody was doing it. And there is no indication in his childhood or youth of exceptional moral virtue or independent thought. He just kind of went with the flow. And according to Catholic doctrine, these popes are supposedly the very best Christians on the planet. So these folks did not help at all, even though they presumably had the power to do so. Now back to the article. Properly understood, the article is a propaganda piece. It's Catholics attempting to wash their hands of their anti-Semitism and its consequences, and it intentionally omits important facts when relevant in order to whitewash the ugly truth. And it seems that lies are part and parcel of the religion. They have to lie in order to kind of clean this up, and they're content to tell them. And the Pope's news machine knows that American Catholics would prefer a clergy puff piece than the truth. You know, the truth would probably never get published in the paper. And newspapers are happy to provide that sort of clergy news because that's what their readers want. And it's a failure, but maybe not a failure of Christianity. It's a failure of our news and the way we consume things.
Hardly, although, to be fair to the news, I think that the shine has worn off a little bit on Pope Francis.
Yeah.
I think I'm seeing more and more recognition that he keeps going around, maybe not unlike Donald Trump, speaking outside the influence of his handlers and saying stuff about how,
getting some media attention, right?
Yeah, gay people are still an abomination, and also it's horrible that people think they can choose their own genders nowadays. I am seeing more attention drawn to that stuff. And to be clear, I think that Pope Francis is by no means the most horrible example of Christianity I've seen, and especially not when he was immediately preceded by Ratzinger.
Yeah, he was pretty awful.
But there has been this pattern of sucking up to him as a wonderfully humble and noble person, and he keeps making these quotes that can sort of be spun into, oh yeah, atheists can go to heaven as long as they convert.
Right.
But he keeps making these sort of
there's
vague,
there's a lot of talking out of both sides of their mouths, right? They say things that plays well in the media, but if you really parse it, or if you really look at what they're actually mean, it's the same old stuff.
Yeah.
Let's take some calls.
All right, we're going to start today with Isaac in Tulsa, Oklahoma. How are you, Isaac?
Hey guys, I'm great. Hey, quickly, let's see, it's Don and it's
Russell.
Russell, okay, and you're Russell.
Yes.
And okay, all right. I'm just trying to get your voices straight. I've only listened a few times.
Okay. Well, thank you for tuning in and also for calling. We love getting callers like you.
Yeah. And let's see. So, first of all, I just want to say I really like a lot of the things that you're doing in your organization. You definitely give a really interesting public forum to hear people out of basically every worldview. And from what I understand, you give to the poor, and in a lot of ways, you look like a religious community.
Well, we're primarily an educational organization.
Yeah,
we'll try not to take that as an insult. But
I'm sorry.
We don't think that religious organizations are all bad. We're just against generally jumping to conclusions without evidence, and so it depends on what you mean.
Well, yeah. So I mean, anyway, I mainly wanted to get into Genesis 1 through 11 and kind of the way I look at that. And a lot of times there's criticism for the evangelical community and how they view creation, and a lot of times that's what leads to conversion to atheism or agnosticism, whenever they really look at the science behind, you know, what the Bible says versus, you know, what we actually know from science.
Why would we care about Genesis? I'm kind of curious.
Well, because 6,000 years really doesn't add up. If you look
I agree.
Yeah.
And also, just to ease your concerns, I'm well aware that only some Christians believe that the Earth was literally created 6,000 to 10,000 years ago. You know, some of the most powerful voices in science, like Francis Collins, for instance, are theistic evolutionists, and so that's not going to be news to us.
Okay, yeah. Anyway, yeah, I'm very much part of that. I definitely believe in macroevolution. I think Big Bang Theory is a possibility. Yeah, I definitely see those chapters as a symbolic and theological. They're important for symbolic and theological reasons. They tell us, you know, what sin is, and they give us a foundation for looking at the world. And in general, I think that foundation adds up from a moral standpoint. And
I don't.
So you think it's okay for a God to say kill your kid, right? You think that's a good moral thing?
You know, that's really interesting. And my name is. My name's Isaac, so
yeah.
I definitely know.
You're familiar with that story, then?
I am. That's a great story, and
I think it's an awful story, personally. But
really, okay. Well, I'll get into why I actually like that story. But he tells Abraham to go up and kill his kid. Give your first and only son. That he's already 100 or super old, 90 something. And this is what he poured his whole life into. There was already this whole miracle. The meaning of Isaac is laughter, because Sarah laughed whenever they had him, because they were so old, and it just seemed stupid that kind of miracle would happen. Anyway, so it's this huge sacrifice. He goes up to the top, and it really demonstrates the view how loving God is. That he would ask so much of you.
No, I think you really have to twist your mind and knots to come up with that conclusion. But go ahead.
I mean, imagine that a person had done something like that. I mean,
right.
If I went up to somebody who I had some kind of power over, and I said, "Hey, you have to prove your loyalty to me by killing your son," and then when the person went to do it, I would. I might say, "Oh, I didn't actually mean it. Stop killing your son."
It's like a gang initiation ritual.
That makes me not as bad as I could have been, but it's. But I mean, that doesn't sound to me like the story of a nice person.
No, you're right. It sounds like a awful, wrathful, prideful God that's just there to demonstrate his power over his subjects. But he gets to the top. And he raises the hammer, the knife, whatever, and then he provides a goat or a lamb or what have you, in its stead, and it really ties all the way up to Jesus, and that's what he was. He was that lamb that provided that sacrifice for me. And I'm sorry, I'm getting kind of preachy, but you get into this, you really do understand it. If you look at the Bible as a whole, and you look at in the context of the gospel.
The Gospels were written, 800, 900 years later, right? And I'm always amazed that people think that it's the same sort of context when there's so much time in between.
Right. Like, well, I mean, from our point of view, and I'm not trying to convince you that this is right or not, but I just wanted to make sure you understand where we're coming from, that, like, the Old Testament was a whole bunch of oral traditions collected together, and then the New Testament was a bunch of people trying to build on top of it to give credibility to this religion they'd come up with. And under that understanding of it, like, there's absolutely no reason to think that the people writing the Old Testament knew or cared about these stories that were coming in the future.
Right, and I'd agree with you that they didn't know. They were just they were being fed whatever God gave them, and their stories to set the foundation for the rest of the Bible. But I don't think it's necessarily important that they knew then. Does that make sense? But anyway,
Yeah, but
I'm
I mean, it just
guessing-
feels like
yeah.
you're reinterpreting it to try to make them all
Okay.
fit into a coherent whole.
Okay. Yeah, I understand that. I don't know a better way to articulate it to you, but I think we should move on.
Okay.
Yeah. And let's see, what else I was going to say.
So you wanted to talk about the symbolism in the first in Genesis 1
Yeah,
through,
sure.
but hold on a second here. I mean,
Yeah.
one of the things that I've got in my head is,
yeah.
just about everybody who reads that thing has got their own interpretation, and all these different religions have different interpretations, and they all disagree. And A, why should I care? And B, why do you think you have the correct one?
Because we have science to back it up. And I think the most beautiful interpretation is actually the interpretation we have with science. That God would take
the
this vast
rainbows,
universe
for
and
example, when we
blaze
see a
it.
rainbow, we know that was God that said, "Oh, we're not going to kill you this way anymore," and that's the real scientific basis of rainbows, right?
Well,
No,
he's not a
of course not.
literalist.
That's
I
not
mean,
what
he
He's not a
already said
literalist.
that.
Oh, okay.
And
Yeah.
All right.
No, I think the scientific explanation is way more interesting.
I agree.
Yeah. And I don't think it's contradictory either. I mean, you can look at it and you can say, okay, this is, why God made the world this way. And this is a very, you have a couple chapters to explain to generations who don't have this, scientific background up until 1500 scientific revolution. That didn't even matter, right?
These strike me as just so stories, right? We're going to make up some sort of explanation for why we have to work, why life is hard, why women suffer during childbirth, why snakes slither, these sorts of things, and it's just a collection of made up crap.
I mean, I've I understand your point about trying to explain in a short space important things that people are going to have to know for generations. But in the first place, the Bible's not that short.
No, you're right.
There's a lot of begats and stuff. But in the second place, like having kids and nephews and no nieces yet. But anyway, I've had to look a lot into like books that explain science in a way that young kids can understand, and it's really impressive how much information some of them manage to convey in a fairly short amount of space. So I would say that the Bible seems at first glance to be wildly inaccurate and isn't anything that I would use to explain anything in particular to anyone.
Well, you know what? There's a couple different authors. If you take Old Testament class or something of that nature,
I have.
And when you look at when you look at literature, you look at for breaks in style in the text, and it in chapter 12 you see that, and it starts lining up with what we see in archaeology.
Wait, what? Be more specific.
Birth of civilization. We see Abraham. He fits it within our modern context of what we could see is actually historical. Abraham, Joseph, Isaac, not in order, obviously. Anyway, I wasn't going anywhere with that.
Not sure what you mean there.
Okay.
Are you saying because there are actual places mentioned in the Bible that the Bible must be true?
No, I'm not saying that.
Okay, because we're all over that.
Yeah. I'm just saying it does go in line with what we have starting at 12, and I'm sure you guys know that. You've heard that before. But up through the flood and Tower of Babel, it all seems really hooky. I agree with that. But the birth of language.
Yeah, but I mean, we don't expect the Bible to have everything wrong. Like,
right.
A lot of the things that we consider ancient history were just current events, and like if they mention, we were in the Tigris and Euphrates River, to just to throw out a couple of examples. It's not like we expect that the whole thing is Tolkien, where they're just making up a language, they're just making up a continent and a bunch of people from scratch. They're telling stories more or less about themselves, but the details in many places are wildly off. And the ones that are accurate are not impressive as such.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you do get later on, not in Genesis, but in other books in the prophets, and it's controversial, but you see these prophets that predict events that do happen in the future. And I know the popular secular idea of it is the authorship was a lot later.
Sometimes, but sometimes it was just, about Nostradamus, right? For example.
No, please explain.
Well, I mean, there was this, I forget what century Nostradamus was in, and I'm going to say something totally wrong. But, I mean, he made a bunch of prophecies, what people refer to as prophecies, but a lot of them were really, really vague. And then, so an event like 9/11 would happen, and then people would say, look, if you squint at the Nostradamus text the right way, he was actually perfectly predicting 9/11.
And invent symbolism and interpretation, right? So that's why we're a little bit leery of this whole idea.
Right, and
you can point
also
to passages where they predict the destruction of the temple. The first one, the second one.
Yeah, but a lot of these prophecies are also open-ended, so they could, the temple could. Most temples are destroyed eventually.
Will be destroyed, right?
Right.
Yeah. Well,
if it happens the next year, it's an amazing prophecy. If it happens hundreds of years later, it's like, oh yeah, that's amazing
prophecy.
too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like in a way, you can't lose.
Mm-hmm.
So can you name something in the first 11 books of Genesis that is some sort of scientific revelation that couldn't possibly have been known to the ancients at the time and is given us insights in nuclear physics or some sort of thing that they couldn't have possibly known about?
Oh, of course not. That'd be ridiculous. I don't think there's. It's not a scientific book. I don't believe that at all.
Okay.
They didn't even have that then.
So what was this claim about science you were making for this book?
Oh, I was just saying that once you get to chapter 12, you get this shift in authorship that starts to line up with what we consider orthodox history, right? But I do maybe what you were referring to was my claim that I think that modern secular science is actually way more interesting than what we have in these first 11 chapters of Genesis. I think using the two together, it can be interesting. You can get both the moral, theological interpretation, and you can get the beautiful, all the science behind it.
Yeah, but we also think a lot of the morality presented in the Bible is not very good.
Okay.
Sure. Yeah, I was just going to say, killing witches, holding slaves, killing your kid. What else? Destruction of a city because.
To be clear, the Bible does not condone human sacrifice. Nowhere in the Bible will you find that.
Well, it redirects it in a way.
What about God sending His beloved Son Jesus to be killed?
Right. Well, he was half God and he was half man.
So there's no real sacrifice there, right?
No, it was complete sacrifice. It was
I see what you did there.
Oh, sorry. What did I do?
No, I mean,
I pulled the fast one.
Okay. Well, the point is, it's greater than anything I could do, and I think maybe Abraham could have done it, but I don't think I could have done it. And I actually believe that.
Then what, sir? Then what? Abraham did what that you couldn't do?
Dying on a cross and getting the full wrath of the Creator poured out on me. For sinful individuals.
Abraham or Jesus?
Jesus.
Okay. I think you said Abraham a minute ago, but no problem.
I'm sorry, that was confusing.
Right. Well, yeah.
Anyway, so I'm going to pivot here a little bit. So if you
Okay.
look at the New Testament,
We're gonna. I mean, this call is going on a while, so we'll maybe take a few more minutes on it. But
yeah.
sure.
I don't want to keep you guys long. Okay, anyway, so I'm sure you guys don't believe in miracles or anything of that nature. But if you look at the New Testament, and you look at Jesus's record of miracles that he does, the first one is when he turns water into wine, and that seems pretty insignificant. If you're trying to write a book that's just there to confuse and to self-propagate, why would you use such an insignificant miracle?
Well, there's a
to
claim of
work
a
into
miracle.
everything else?
I'm not sure there was a miracle.
Right. But if you claim that there was a miracle, why would you start with something so insignificant and useless? He's raising dead people. He's telling the sick to walk and open their eyes and all these things. Why would you start with something so insignificant if you're just trying to self-propagate?
Have you read Game of Thrones?
I have. All 5
So
books.
one of the things, when I pitch Game of Thrones to people who haven't read or seen it yet, because I've loved it for a long time.
I love it too. Yeah.
Yeah, great series. One of the things that I pitch at people is that it starts out with very little magic in the world, so it's all kind of simple and relatable, and then it builds up to shadow babies and zombies and dragons, but it doesn't throw all that stuff at you right away. I'm not saying. I mean,
well, first chapter.
Maybe
we're going to argue Game of Thrones. First chapter, you see ice zombies. And
you do, but they're a little mysterious. But I mean, my point is, there are lots of narrative reasons why you might want to lead with the boring
character
stuff.
development.
And I'm not saying I know what was in the minds of the Bible authors, but I mean, whatever else you can say about the Bible, it worked. I mean, it's a huge successful religion. So I don't think it's really something I want to spend time on to second guess the narrative decisions of the authors.
Right. So in our conversation, we figured out that the Bible isn't necessarily true, it isn't necessarily novel, and it isn't necessarily moral. Again, I'm asking why do we care about it?
Why do we care about it?
Yeah.
It gives so that we can know our Creator. And I didn't even touch on this, but
I don't believe there was a Creator, and I don't believe the Bible has any relationship to that. So it's just a claim. It's just a bald assertion without evidence. If you'd like to provide the evidence, we're be glad to listen.
No, and I don't believe that there's any way to prove or disprove Christianity or any theism in any particular way. But at the end of the day, it comes down to pride and saying, okay, I'm in complete control of my life, or I'm going to sacrifice it for something different, for something more meaningful. And if you never come to that point, then I don't think there's a whole lot of science to debate on it. That's the science is never going to disprove or prove one way or the other.
Okay.
Yeah. I guess we're going to wrap up there. Hey, it was great talking to you guys.
Yeah, appreciate your call.
I enjoyed the conversation. Call back anytime.
Yeah, I did too.
Thanks.
I will. Certainly will. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Can't be proved or disproved, but we just need to believe it anyway.
Lots of failures, though.
Yeah. All right. We're going to talk to Cassandra in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Hi, yes.
Hello.
Hi. Thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
Thanks for
what's
calling.
Well, first I want to say I've been watching you guys for a couple years now, ever since we moved to New York about 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, I'm a former atheist now. I guess I kind of wanted to share with everyone my experience with being a Christian and how it made my depression worse. Because you know how you're not worthy at all under God, and only He makes you okay, and you're all a piece of shit.
Say, yeah.
So that kind of
the victim mentality, right?
Yeah. So I was an Episcopalian until I was about 12. I turned born again Christian when I was 12 years old, and that's when I started cutting myself. was when I became a Christian.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I just say that to share that with everyone that is a theist here, to understand that
Extent of it.
I don't know, that it can kind of mess with you, that thought that I always felt I had a connection with the Holy Spirit. That was the only of the Trinity that I felt like I had a connection with, was that one.
Did you feel like, you had internalized the message that you were bad, and hurting yourself was a way of sort of making up for it?
Yeah, I already felt that way, and then Christianity made me feel worse. That even more, that it actually proved it.
Yeah.
You could say that it was actually documented, and like, oh, I am actually a sinner and I'm worthless, and there's no way that I could be better. And I would, pray and cry and all that, thinking that I could be better, and I never felt like I could be. So that was one thing.
Hope you have a better view of yourself now.
Yes, as an atheist, I feel much better.
Yay.
Yay. And then
and you don't have these stumbling blocks to get help, right? You can say, well, I'm in this situation and I need help, and I can go get it, right? Instead of getting in this spin machine of I'm evil and I deserve this and blah blah blah, right?
Yes. Okay. Absolutely. No, I've seen help and all of that, and my current husband is very supportive. The other thing that I guess my second point was that I don't know how many people fall into this, but I was young and I thought the world was kind of crappy, so I wanted to believe in all of the supernatural, what seemed beautiful things in the Bible, like prophecy and all of that. So I was with a partner. Oh, he wasn't my partner yet, but he convinced me he was a prophet, and I wanted to believe it. And so I ran off and got married at 18 to someone who claimed he was a prophet.
Oh no.
That
he wasn't.
Probably didn't go well.
No, it didn't. But I tried for 9 years to make it work. It was like a mini cult, I guess you could say, of sorts. But my best friend from so I met someone at 17 who I'm currently with now. I should have been with, but so he knows everything that I had gone through, and he helped me when I finally decided to leave after 9 years. He helped me through that, along with my family and my friends. But I didn't realize.
Maybe we should put this man up for sainthood.
Yes. Yeah. He wouldn't want it.
I can't help but be struck by the way the previous caller was saying that, rejection of God, this is what I got from him, that it's kind of arrogant and self-centered because you can take care of your, you imagine that you can take care of your own problems. But I think that you're showing some of the darker side to this, which is just that being credulous about the things you're told and believing that there's a higher power than you can, especially if you misplace it in somebody who's obviously trying to manipulate you, can have very dangerous consequences, right?
Right, exactly. And it wasn't even like it was that bad. It wasn't like, full Kool-Aid type, type of cult. It wasn't nearly that bad, but it was enough to really screw with me. Like I had to like do that side thing where like finally, okay, so I was a Christian for like a few years into it in my early 20s. Like, I remember the time I deconverted. I was like, I knew inside me that I didn't really believe, but I had to verbally say it, to say, Jesus, I don't believe in you. And I had to pull off on the side of the road, and I had a complete meltdown, like crying and all that, but I had to do it. And that was the only way I could actually release myself of this.
Well, that's maybe a testament to how religion sort of puts their hooks into people and sort of really has a hold on people. It is a struggle for many people to leave and to work their way out. I
guess, right. And then that kind of brings me to the third thing I wanted to say was that so I was in a youth ministry when I was a teenager in this. I sang backup in a youth band, and I could feel, I knew that I could feel something, what I would have called the Holy Spirit. And so years later, when I was no longer a Christian, but I still felt sort of spiritual, I was in this massage session with my massage therapist, and I literally felt the exact same thing of what that Holy Ghost moment felt like, but I was no longer Christian, and it was during a massage session. But it was the same exact I'm drunk in the spirit feeling. Like I felt like God was there, and it was a totally different experience, and it floored me. I was like, oh my God, like we make this happen. Like it's up to us in this situation, and we create this feeling. And I feel like I want to tell all of the Christians out there that feel that time, especially the born agains, we get very emotional and excited. I want them to know that this isn't just that. It's more than that.
It's okay.
We make that happen because we want it. We seek it. Like I would cry and pray and beg, like I could feel God. And so many times I was let down. So many times. And I didn't understand. I felt I was broken. There was something wrong with me, which added to my depression. But it wasn't me. Anyway, I just wanted people to understand that
Yeah, and
that experience
brains
happens, and
do weird things, and what religion does a lot of times is provide a framework where, they make up an explanation for it that serves the religion.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, it seems like you've had a long and interesting journey. I hope you're still young in your years and can enjoy the rest of your life without all these negative influences.
I'm only 34 now.
Okay,
so
that's still pretty young. You've got a ways to go yet.
Not bad. Okay. Yeah.
Well, you sound like you're on a good place now, and so we're happy for you. And
thank you. I feel like I'm a strong humanist. That's how I label myself now, mostly as humanist.
Well, it sounds like you might benefit some other folks if you blog about your experience. And
I've been told that I should write about my times and my experiences. So I am seeking to finally move myself to finally do that. Right?
Yeah, and I mean not just for other people. It can be very personally satisfying too, right?
Yeah.
To get some of that stuff off your chest.
Therapeutic, right?
Hey. Well, thank you, Cassandra.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Appreciate your call.
Oh, well, thank you for taking it.
Sure.
Okay.
All right.
Bye.
Good night.
Drake in New Orleans, how are you?
Yes. Live?
Yes.
All right. I was wondering about how one episode y'all had made a point about the mustard seed not being the smallest seed.
Oh, we may have mentioned that, years ago.
Well, probably probably more than once. Are we talking about the Bible verse that says that if you have faith even the size of a mustard seed, then you can move mountains? Is that the line?
Yeah, there was a mustard seed, a verse in the Bible saying it's the smallest seed. And y'all had made a point that it wasn't even the smallest seed back then.
Yeah, it would probably have been known to be not the smallest seed. So, okay, so what about it?
And?
And?
All right. I was just going to say, well, what about how during those times they referenced things such as the earth being a circle, or like, let's say they referenced things back then that they thought were true because at that time, that's what they thought was to be true.
So they didn't have any special knowledge, right? They didn't have any omnipotent person whispering in their ear and telling them the right answer, right?
Well, I mean, it wouldn't really make sense. I mean, if they had any other way of knowing, I mean, everything else in the Bible would, they just had the chronological order of everything making perfect sense. It wouldn't make sense if it just straight up said that it's not the smallest seed at that time.
Wait.
It wouldn't make sense.
I'm confused. What are we talking about with the mustard seed? I thought we were talking about the power of faith moving mountains, but it doesn't sound like that's what you meant.
I know that y'all should know that. It's y'all show. Y'all talked about it. But
We don't memorize every conversation we've ever had over 20 years or whatever. So you need to provide more context.
So what I'm hearing what I hear you're saying is that the the stories in the Bible are representative of the knowledge that the people had at that time. That's what I'm hearing you say. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And I asked if in that case, it seems to be saying that there was nobody who was very wise and was sort of way beyond and knew everything, whispering in their ears and talking with them, giving them magic answers that were sort of above and beyond what they already knew.
I wish Matt would have been on the show today. He would have been a good debate. But, I mean, that's just the point I wanted to make, really. One point I wanted to make. It's actually, I believe it's Mark, chapter 4, verse 31.
What?
And it says, Mark, chapter 4, verse 31.
What about it?
It is like a grain of mustard seed, which is sown in the earth is less than all the seeds that be in the earth.
And I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time getting a message out of all this. What are you trying to say? Can you be a little more straightforward?
Well, for that point, I was just saying that back then it would make sense that they only put in the verse of what they knew to be true, just like what we would put to be true in our science books these days to be true.
And they
right.
And
I'm making the point that there
wrong, right?
Obviously was no God involved, because if there was a God involved, he would know better, right?
I'm going to get to that in a little bit also. What about...
I'm not sure you're going to stay on the line long enough to get to that if you don't get to a point.
I was going to bring another point about how is there a burden of proof for atheism?
It depends what you mean by that, because atheism is the rejection of a claim, mainly. I think if atheists said, well, I mean, I get in arguments with other atheists about this from time to time.
Yeah, if atheism is a lack of a belief in gods, then there is no burden of proof, because we're just saying we don't believe a particular claim.
Right.
And the burden of proof is on the person making such a claim.
All right, so in other words, there is no religion with evidence that would be evidence for their God.
No.
We're open to all
given
kinds of
sufficient
evidence.
that Christianity or whatever you're trying to advocate for is correct, we would take that into account, and maybe that would change our minds. So what you got?
All right. How's about my evidence is for Christianity? And my evidence is for Christianity. I'm gonna make one point that churches. I mean, I've been to church for like 6-7 years straight, every Sunday and every Wednesday, twice every Sunday. I've seen it with my own eyes. People falling down in the Holy Spirit. All right, it's like they would pray to God and ask to receive the Holy Spirit.
I believe
that's your
people
best shot.
Had emotional experiences.
Yes.
I don't believe that there's a God involved.
Wait. All right, if you pray to God and ask to get filled with the Holy Spirit, then you do fall down. Then my burden of proof, I'm shifting the burden of proof on y'all to disprove that that's not the Holy Spirit.
You are shifting the burden of proof, and not in a coherent way. I mean, I could say, look, this water is made by Nestle. And as everybody knows, the Nestle Corporation is run by an interdimensional goblin. Prove that it's not. Like, that's not how it works, is my point. I mean, so far what you've told us is that people say some words and then they fall down. And then you're saying, and so God exists. And we need a little more to go on than that is the problem.
Well, I mean, I believe I shifted the burden of proof in the sense that you said there is no burden of proof for atheism, correct?
I'm not sure. I'm not convinced you understand what the term burden of proof means right now.
I believe burden of proof must be met to have absence of evidence and evidence of absence. Some need specific evidence with a negative detection. Specific knowledge with a negative detection would be evidence of absence.
Okay, let me help you out here. I would describe it as the default position on something should be not believing it until you have a reason to believe it. Okay, fair enough?
All right.
Right now, some people saying some words and then falling down is not a reason to believe in an all-powerful, all-knowing creator of the universe.
All right, but I do believe that atheism is represented all worldwide as not having a burden of proof, correct? Like at all.
It depends on what the atheists are saying.
Yeah, if atheism is the lack of belief in gods, we do not have a burden of proof because we are not believing the claim that there is God, and we have not seen sufficient evidence to believe it.
If y'all don't have any adequate evidence or any evidence at all, then y'all don't have a burden of proof, correct?
That's right.
All right, so if I bring forth an evidence, then I would be shifting the burden of proof on
No.
If you presented some credible evidence.
Yeah, we would look at your evidence and weigh it and take a look at it and see whether. And we've just now looked at your falling down and in excitement. Our last caller had a religious experience from a massage. Good grief! Was there a God involved here? No. No.
I don't know. I was like.
You weren't there, right? Yeah.
All I'm saying.
I'm not impressed by this evidence.
All I'm saying is that y'all say that atheists worldwide is believed to have no burden of proof. That's what I'm saying. I'm agreeing that you are giving good examples of the burden of proof to explain it, but my point is that atheism has no burden of proof, and now it does because I just gave a point that it does. And I'm agreeing. You gave an example of how the burden of proof works, and so did I. I just did the same thing.
Okay.
Except, all right.
So yeah, as I've defined it, we don't have a burden of proof, but I think we do have to be honest and weigh evidence when it's presented and look at it and try to give it a fair shake. So I do think that in that respect we have a kind of a burden of at least considering and being open to evidence, and we try to do that, I think.
Wait. How long has this show been on so far? Like
20 plus years? Almost 20 years. Quite a long time.
Getting there.
What would be the best reason to be an atheist?
Because there's no evidence for God.
All right. So I've given evidence. And what would be the best reason to not be an atheist?
You've given crappy evidence.
Yeah, I mean, you've said some things.
What is the best reason? What is the best reason to not be an atheist?
Finding some reasonable evidence for God would be.
All right, so I've given evidence.
No, reasonable. You can't just say a thing and then say now there's evidence.
So over the last couple years, I've done 38, 40 shows on the failures of Christianity. If there was this all-powerful God helping Christians out and giving them all these wonderful things, why are they such screw-ups?
All right. I was going to add to that. I was going to say, I'm going to wind up calling back on all this. I'd like to talk to Matt because I love watching.
Well, then call back a week when he's on.
Yep.
Okay, bye. Let Matt enjoy your company because I've had plenty of it. James in Miami.
Hello.
Hey, what's up?
Hello.
Hello. I'm a longtime watcher of the show.
Hi.
However, I myself am a theist with a D.
Okay.
And
you want to briefly say what that means to you? Like, what do you believe?
I have my own personal reason for believing that God exists.
Okay.
But I don't have a reason to try to convince other people to believe that he exists.
Okay.
And
But does that God interfere with people's lives currently, or are we talking about a God who did something once and then stopped?
Still interacts personally.
Oh, okay. So I have a different understanding of the word deist, but that's okay. Now we know.
Okay. Basically, what I want to come onto the show and talk about is how I see a lot of times it's mentioned how God is a unlikable character, and I'm just trying to say, even whether or not if God is likable or unlikable, it's not really proving or disproving God's existence.
That is true. There were some very unlikable people who really existed.
Yeah. I just see it's mentioned on the show so much. About God being immoral thug, so on and so forth. And I'm just thinking, that's kind of not needed to talk about. It should just be
Well,
on.
there's this claim that this God is the author of morality and that you should follow his morals, and that how can you be moral without God, and all this blather about morality and special claims of morality by popes and these sorts of things, and we call bunk on all that, and the character of God in the Bible, I think, is quite relevant to that sort of question.
Yeah, so maybe you misinterpreted what somebody was saying. I mean, the fact that God, that we consider him to have a bad character, doesn't mean that God isn't real, but it does call into question the whole God is the perfect standard and arbiter of what is good and bad.
That's when I go ahead and I think about what Matt Dillahunty about what he
Everybody
says about
wants
morality.
to talk about Matt today.
Okay.
But fine.
Well, he go ahead and he tried to define morality as in what's good for the well-being of humans.
Okay,
We are
I can go
physical
with that.
creatures in the physical world.
I think that's a reasonable definition. We can go pretty far with that definition.
Yeah, I mean, I would maybe want to nitpick some details, but as a one-sentence summary, fine.
Okay. So where I go from that is, well, we will have our morals as for what our goal is to be. Our goal will be healthy and happy, but God could have totally different goals. So when it's if the Bible is his book, when he tried to say that a certain thing is good, it might be for a goal that we are unaware of.
It might be a goal that we don't care about. Like, why, if some other guy states, well, I don't want you to be happy and healthy, I want you to do this instead.
Kill your kid, for example.
Why should we be concerned for that guy being, for that guy's standards?
So are we supposed to suck up to this God because he's so powerful and he's going to torture us in the afterlife if we don't like bow down before him and kiss his ass or whatever? Is that the idea?
No.
Why is this God's morals relevant to humanity?
Same reason why atheist morals and theist morals would be relative to each other, because you are occupying the same space.
Well, if the question was, God lives among us, let's say there's a Zeus-like God who comes down from Mount Olympus and hangs out occasionally, and people were treating God badly, and we wanted to know, how can we come to some kind of compromise and judge how God can treat us fairly and we can treat God fairly, that would be one thing. But I get the impression that most religious morality is, God says this, do this, the end.
Right, or be tortured.
Right. And we don't care for that kind of
bullshit
morality.
on that.
If God showed up and demonstrated himself to be real and said, hey, it makes me uncomfortable when you say this, we could have a discussion about, oh, well, maybe we haven't been very nice to you, God. What can we do better? Same as other people.
Yeah.
Theists and atheists have to get along because there are real people who need to get along.
Sharing the planet, right?
World.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, it's fair to not go ahead and care for what their goals will be and for offending them. In the same way how we do it with other humans, where you don't necessarily have to care about offending another humans or what that other human's goal is.
Yeah, but we at least believe in other humans, and we don't believe in God.
Okay. I think I said about as much as I could.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, thank you for having me on the show.
All right.
Sure. Take care, James.
Thanks.
All right. Goodbye.
Oh, I feel a little mean right now, but I'm not sure why.
Okay. Let's pick another caller. What do you think?
Okay. Don't line up more calls, by the way. 25 minutes, and then we're going to Star of India after the show, arriving
Indian
around
food.
6:15 or
Yeah.
6:30. It seemed to work out pretty well last week, but I'm still taking in feedback. Some people had never had Indian food before and thought it was weird.
That's awesome stuff.
Yeah, I'm a fan. Let's see. So we're going to Kevin. Hello?
Kevin in Los Angeles.
Los
You're on the
Angeles,
air.
yes.
Hey, I wanted to talk about the addiction premium subject.
What?
Hello? You hear
We're having a little trouble
Connection's
hearing
not
you.
very clear.
me? How about now?
Better.
Better? Okay. So I was just going to say, I think the addiction treatment subject is one of the most vulnerable and kind of repressive places for an atheist to be. So,
Addiction recovery?
Yeah. Yeah. So if an atheist is an alcoholic, there's over 115,000 groups that supposedly there's Alcoholics Anonymous in the U.S., and there's about 2 or 3,000 from what I could find, secular organizations. So what that means is, like, for me, even in LA, I have to go an hour to get to a secular group. There's only about 3 a week in LA. So for somebody in a rural part of America like Alabama or North Dakota or something, essentially what they have to do is, if they need to go to a support group, is they do a bunch of crap at Alcoholics Anonymous just to get any support.
Yeah, it's
muffled to you because I can't really tell what he's saying at all.
It's a frustrating situation in that often these Alcoholics Anonymous meetings and such are mandated by a judge or these sorts of things, and the secular alternatives are, as you say, are few and far between, and you happen to live in a big city, so you at least have access to such a thing, but a lot of folks don't. And
Right.
it's a hard thing because you're sort of perhaps at the mercy of your addiction or at the mercy of a judge who is making a decision on your behalf, and you're a little bit powerless in that respect, and the decision's kind of forced on you, and you may or may not want to be able to stand up for your rights and try to get a different type of recovery program. Are you more interested in the sort of legal proscription of Alcoholics Anonymous, or just the fact that there aren't as many secular alternatives out there?
Well, I'm interested in both, but one of the things is, even if you're not in the court, if you walk into one of these rooms, you're very vulnerable, because a lot of the tactics they use is kind of like the deathbed conversion type thing, where you're in a really tight spot, and they're telling you the only way you can get sober is if you believe in this higher power. And they say higher power can be a doorknob or the ocean and stuff like that. And to me, it seems like that's a way for them to get their foot in the door. So they can get. It's like it's their way of kind of trying to get people to believe, in my experience.
Yeah, I mean, you can focus on that, or you can say, well, I just don't believe that part. I'm going to kind of put that aside and see what benefit I can get out of the rest of it. I mean, some of it has to do with your attitude. I agree. It's not a good thing to be kind of forcing higher power or God or whatever on various people, especially in a secular law society that we have. But maybe if you're forced into such a situation, you can at least get something out of the rest of the program and maybe just kind of roll your eyes at the God thing and see what else you can get out of it.
Yeah, that's what I did for a while, but what results is kind of, you've got to be quiet about a big part of it. Because you can't, going to these groups is kind of like, you can't really say that you're an atheist, because if you say you don't believe, then people think you're kind of propagating that, and they think it's dangerous because you're telling people, oh, you don't have to believe. But then if you say you don't believe, then the response I've gotten is, oh, you're not really an alcoholic then, because if you can get over it without God, then you're not really an alcoholic. So yeah, I mean, I get that you get to know all that and kind of get what you can, but for me, it kind of silenced a lot of the issues I went through, because I couldn't be totally honest without kind of getting that like majority kind of silence me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I just think it's a tough spot for atheists.
Yeah, it is, and I think
I'm going to need to let you go because I'm having a really hard time understanding things.
Well, I would just encourage you to be more vocal. Try to get more secular. Try to ask for more secular alternatives. If you have time, try to set one up yourself, and maybe volunteer. These sorts of things. Help them out. So,
okay.
Good luck, Kevin.
Thanks.
Yeah, it was a little hard to hear. I think we had a little muddy conversation there.
Yeah. I have heard a lot of people, a lot of indication that like 12-step programs like Alcoholics Anonymous don't really work as well as they are claimed to.
Yeah, there's a lot of controversy there. Right?
Yeah, but I'm not sure I want to die on this hill, so I don't know if I want to make a strong point one way or the other. In the meantime, as they say on Arrested Development, I've made a huge mistake. I stated out loud, hey, call screeners, don't let more people through. I meant use the people who are all on the lines to fill out the rest of the show. But I think a bunch of people must have heard me say that and hung up.
Yeah, we're going to go on until 6 o'clock.
We do have some open lines now, so call back, especially if you're a theist. But we do still have a couple more. Ron in Raleigh Beach. Hello?
Hey, how you doing, Russell? Are you there?
I'm good. How are you?
Oh, pretty good. No, I was just calling, I was watching the show a couple weeks ago about the guy claiming that the moon gives off light.
Yeah, well, the moon reflects light, yeah. But he was saying the moon generates its own light, I think.
He was claiming that the moon gives light.
Right, and it's cold light.
If you remember what he was saying.
Yes, that's what he was saying.
Yeah.
And that was nonsense.
What's that? I'm sorry.
That was nonsense.
Yeah, I was wondering why you didn't ask the guy, well, if the moon gives off light, why is there a dark side? Because wouldn't the other side give off light too, or just half the moon does?
I could swear we said that at some point. Yeah. I can't remember.
Yeah. And then he went on saying that nobody's been to the moon, there was no Apollo missions or something like that.
Oh, I hear that a fair bit. Fortunately, there was a mirror that was put on the moon, and you can actually reflect a laser.
Well, the laser or the observatories, they use lasers, and they shoot lasers at it to measure the distance from the Earth to the moon to see how far it's going out, moving out.
Yep.
And it's at a rate like what your thumbnail grows.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
light is very interesting and complicated.
Well, light is pretty much the only way we get to learn about the universe, right? Because we can't reach out and touch it, or we.
Yeah, radio waves.
Yeah, light of various forms, right?
Well, yeah, I guess.
Right.
So.
Yeah. But anyways, I just wanted to call and let everybody know that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
The moon does not give off light. You're not.
Right.
Did you say something earlier that they use thermometer and they do get heat from the moon on Earth?
Well, okay. Scientifically, what ought to happen, all else being equal, is that the reason you see the moon at all is because the sun shines on the moon. The lights bounce off. The light rays bounce off the moon's surface, and some of the light rays eventually make their way back to your eyes.
Right, we give off heat. Right.
Yeah, light and heat are generally generated from the same source, and this guy was claiming that there are two things that can't be explained by science. One of them being that the moon was generating its own light, and then the other one being that the light itself, instead of warming things up, was making things cooler somehow.
That doesn't make sense, though.
No, it doesn't make sense. But I mean, I think the point he was trying to make was that because it doesn't make sense, science is all bunk, and therefore God exists.
Right. The old argument from ignorance, or
right.
Yeah, they talk about miracles, and I think there's only one miracle I could think of that does exist, is how today's age, with all the technology and science and everything we know, how billions of people could believe in an invisible man. That's crazy.
Yeah. Well, people believing irrational things is surprising, but certainly doesn't rise to the level of being miraculous.
Right. Yeah, my wife, she's Catholic actually, and I've been with her for like 16 years now, and at first she was like, "Oh, we got to go to church, and I'm like, "Yeah, I don't think so."
Well, you're still married. I guess that's an accomplishment.
I've been an atheist since I was 6 years old. I had.
Did we lose him?
Still there?
Yeah. Oh, well.
I think we lost him.
Yeah, okay. Mark in Orange County, how are you?
Hello?
Hi.
Hi, yeah. My name is Mark. Yeah, I wanted to talk about what I perceive to be a logical disconnect between religion and the comfort people say they derive from religion.
Oh, yeah.
It just seems kind of mysterious to me, especially when you think about certain things like, as an atheist, I myself take comfort in that because, there's nothing to worry about after you die. But I've talked to people who say they get great comfort from their religion. In particular, they usually talk about Christianity. And I say, well, what kind of comfort do you get out of it? And they always seem to kind of draw a blank, but something that they always think, well, you have the gift of heaven after you die. But one thing there's lots of things in the Bible that stand out to me is like, this is a God you can't trust. For example, if you go back to the story of Noah's Ark and how God repenteth that he make man, according to the Bible. But, how can all-knowing God repenteth anything? But in other words, this is a God who can change his mind. Mm-hmm. And if he could change his mind about that, then how do we know that if you die and you go to heaven, he won't decide later on, I've had enough of you. You've been here for 1,000 years, and I'm just going to send you to hell or whatever
right.
he decides to do.
He could be a slumlord.
You're not trustworthy.
Out.
Right. But, just little things like that, it seems like, it just does not seem like you can reconcile the Bible with comfort, in my opinion.
Well, I guess I would say from the religious people I've talked to that, there's that whole mishmash of stories that's in the Bible, and then there's the picture that people have of God in their heads that comes to them culturally and is filtered through the kinds of things that they want to believe. You hear a lot of Christians talking about how they don't take the Bible literally, but they believe in some kind of spirit or energy that they call God. So, everybody kind of makes up their own definition, and they superimpose the good, happy, warm feelings they have over it. They take some of the stories seriously and some of the stories not so seriously.
On the subject of comfort, I often hear Christians say, God's looking out for me and going to take care of me and can't give me any more than I can handle and these sorts of things. And that might be very comforting for someone who is feeling kind of afraid and insecure about. And the reality is a pretty scary place, right? There's all sorts of threats and problems and all sorts of things that can go south.
I mean, let's face it, being dead is the default state of everything in the universe.
Right.
It's really kind of surprising and unlikely that any specific thing is alive, and all we can do is enjoy our good luck that we get to be alive for a little while.
Right.
Right, that's the atheist viewpoint, but it just comes down to, I can understand, like, hey, if I could get myself to believe this, and and lots of people do, but then they hit these, it seems to be speed bumps or bumps in the road where you say, well, this really doesn't make sense. Looking at God, because God, they personify God, they make him into almost a human when they talk about him, and then you give him kind of a personality, and then you think, okay, but reading this, it sounds like this God is very unpredictable, not he seems to kind of fly off the handle at times, and he just doesn't seem to be someone who you could really trust. And the word supposedly is that, okay, well, you do all these things, you believe in me, you get to go to heaven forever. But
it strikes me as kind of codependent, right? Because you're trying to keep this kind of angry, crazy person happy by appeasing them, and maybe you'll get some goodies along the way, or you'll get loved or whatever. And it just is kind of like
until he changes
very creepy sort of relationship, in my opinion.
Right. and it's just, but when I talk to people who are religious, and they're just like, oh yes, I derive great comfort out of religion, and I keep wondering, scratching my head, thinking, okay, go ahead, tell me what it is, why, and it's like.
Well, that's a good strategy, is asking questions, especially,
Well, especially if the Christian also believes that some people go to hell. Like, that's a really disturbing idea for a lot of people. And there are things that you just kind of swallow without thinking about it.
Yeah. And I think that in general, a lot of Christians don't think about their beliefs terribly much. And having this sort of line of reasoning where you kind of have an honest conversation about it, I think may get people to think a little bit, and maybe they'll come to realize that this doesn't make a whole lot of sense. The more you think about it, that's been my experience. The more I learn about Christianity, the less sense it makes.
Right, and then one final point is that when I talk to people and say, you could really derive comfort out of atheism because you weren't afraid of anything before you were born. You couldn't be, obviously. You could be scared. You could be depressed. You could be lonely, or any of those things. And it's like you before you were born, you couldn't. It's absolutely impossible to be scared or afraid or any negative feeling.
Right. This is a point that Epicurus made. Yeah, long before Jesus was allegedly born. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Although I don't know if I'd describe that as comforting. I mean,
it can be.
It depends on your frame of mind, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, because other people I've tried to help that way say, well, that thought just terrifies me, and I think, well, maybe you're just not looking at it the same way I am. But,
right. Yeah. Well, or you can ask, what are you going to do in heaven, and are you going to play the harp and flutter around and praise Jesus over and over again for trillions of years? That's going to get really dull real quick.
Here, watch this episode of The Twilight Zone. Tell me if you still feel comfortable with that idea. But I mean, comfort is a tricky thing because, like, believing comforting lies can be comforting. I mean, look, I don't want to die. I'd like to think that I'm going to live forever. And if I had a real belief that I was going to live forever, and then somebody comes along and rips that away and says, actually, no, when you die, that's it. I wouldn't necessarily find that comforting, but
not when you put it that
I'm sorry.
Way, right?
Yeah. Well, that's how it comes across, I think, to a lot of Christians.
Right. Sometimes, I mean, atheists can come across as killjoys. Unfortunately, if if there's a truth that's unpleasant, people don't necessarily feel better for knowing the truth all the time.
Yeah.
Well, that's true.
Okay.
Right.
So thank you for your
very
call,
much.
Mark. I think we're going to move on to
guys.
one more caller
Yeah.
and
Thanks.
close it out.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Although I don't want to leave our listeners with the impression that atheism is just grim and joyless and uncomfortable. I think there are a lot of great things worth living for.
Sure.
They just don't happen to be the same things that Christians imagine are real.
Right, right. I think we feel a sense of responsibility to make the world a better place because
Right.
there ain't going to be a God do it, and we can't invoke him by prayer or whatever and get magical things to happen. We got to do it ourselves.
Yeah,
And that's not a bad thing.
sure. Martin in Sweden, I guess you're going to be our last caller most likely. Hello?
Oh, hi.
Hi.
Yeah. I just want to say it's a really fun show to watch.
Thank you.
The whole thing is really weird because in Sweden, not even a priest are Christian.
Yeah, we know. Well, I haven't heard it put that way.
Oh, the irony. I love it. We have 3 Swedes in the audience, our live audience right now.
Yeah, I heard. Yeah, maybe they also get that impression.
Yeah, we'll quiz them over dinner.
Right.
Yeah.
American culture can be pretty strange to people who, yeah. Yeah, apparently, actually, I just listened to an episode of This American Life where they talk about how Germans make fun of Americans, and apparently Germans all think that Americans are obsessed with cowboys. And no American I know has cared anything about cowboys for decades.
Cowboys.
Cowboys, yeah.
What?
Cowboys, guys with
cowboys.
hats.
Yeah. Okay.
Like so it's weird how these stereotypes form, but I mean also I think a lot of Europeans are very jarred to know how central a role religion plays in the life of people in different parts of the country, and I can't help thinking of those Germans who showed up and filmed us for this documentary they did.
Mission Control Texas.
Yeah, Mission Control Texas, an award-winning documentary. And they got here and they started checking out megachurches, and they were so fascinated by the megachurches that they wound up filling the film with like long stretches of just footage of people talking in megachurches. and that's funny to us because we see that all the time.
Because the crazy spoke for itself, right?
Right. Yeah, but I mean, it wasn't even all that unusual for us to see some of that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, the most big thing here with religion was that they built a Lego Jesus.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but I was wondering about they teach creationism in school in some places, I've heard. So how do they choose which creationist story they?
Well, I mean, anybody who wants to teach creationism sort of takes it as a given that it's going to be either young Earth creationism or some kind of vague, unspecified creationism, so that they don't have to look like they're talking about religion.
Let me nuance this a little bit. I think throughout the country, it is illegal for a state institution to promote or favor a particular religion.
Right.
And institutions that do this do run the risk of having legal challenges, and there have been legal challenges, but somebody has to stand up and complain. On the other side, we have communities that sort of are so deeply Christian that they sort of expect this, and they give anybody who's teaching hell who isn't teaching creationism, and there's this sort of a cultural expectations, and there's a big gray area in between where both things happen.
There are a lot of religious groups also that are very eager to offer materials that you can buy
Yes, yes.
For profit that are, basically, here are some teaching aids that you can use and you can teach. So when you ask who decides what version of creationism gets taught, it's the individual teachers who are generally violating the law. And it's these well-funded religious organizations that are providing this bullshit material for them to teach out of.
Isn't it the parents who say that they want the school to teach creationism?
Sometimes the parents do, but
angry? I mean, don't they get angry when they teach the wrong creationism?
Probably.
Well, and it's. I think that when creationism is taught in the United States, it's biblical creationism.
Yeah, by default, it's Protestant Christian creationism.
Okay. Yep.
Like when you ask people what about other religions, sometimes you even get blank stares because that's just not something they think about in their communities. But we're out of time.
Okay.
So thank you for your call, and I guess we'll wrap up here.
Yep. Thanks for calling.
Thanks for having me.
Take care, Martin.
Bye.
All right. Bye. That's our show. Thank you once again, Don, for
I had fun today.
Another fine presentation. And the show will be back next week. And don't forget to come by the Austin Pride Festival and say hi. See ya. Going to Star of India after this. Bye now. Hi, this is Russell Glasser, host of The Atheist Experience. You know, The Atheist Experience is made possible by volunteers and the generous support of viewers like you. If the promotion of positive atheist culture and separation of church and state are values that you hold, please consider contributing by becoming an ACA member or visiting our product page at evolvefish.com under the Partner tab. Thank you.